A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangu-Shampagi, and tonight we will be discussing the state of the economy. During the week we saw the Bank of Uganda take over management of Crane Bank, the third largest bank, and a purely indigenous bank owned by local Ugandans. And what does it mean if such a bank is taken over by the central bank? So we'll be discussing that tonight. Let me introduce, from my extreme left, Enoch. Do you know you? Enoch is an economist. He works with, he is a PhD student in South Africa. Enoch, very nice to have you.
Yeah, happy to be here too.
Thank you. You lad, what else you do? We have Yonasani Kanyomozi, commonly known as Yona Kanyomozi. He's a former minister for cooperatives. That's quite a few years ago, isn't it? Hmm? That's quite a few years ago, the last time you were a minister.
You can see how long, what has happened to me. Yeah, many years ago.
Yes, Yona, very nice to have you. Always a pleasure to be with you here.
Thank you.
We have the Minister of State for Planning, the Honorable David Bahati. You're most welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And my colleague, Onapito Ekomloid.
Good evening.
Ona, let me start with you. You work in the private sector, and you're watching, following what's going on with the takeover. The big question we need to ask, is the action of the central bank on Crane Bank a mere signal of tougher times ahead? Or is this something normal in the business
First of all, you are doing a lot of disservice to our viewers, asking a layman like me about economic issues when they are eminent economists.
I have economists all around me.
Look, Charles, I think it's always hard to argue whether the economy in Uganda is all rosy. I think that is not a debatable issue. Nobody can argue that yes, convincingly, because the Honourable Minister and at the highest level of government, even the president himself, is not shy to say there are always problems in the economy. That's the very reason why we're having government with all the plans, from so many visions. So there is an issue in the economy. I think the only debate often is who is responsible for the problems in the economy, and for the little that we have, how is it being well shared? Those are mainly the real debates that one can engage in. But to argue that everything is fine would be foolhardy in my view.
Let me come to you. You're the minister in charge of planning. And in planning, I think you would want to have many more indigenous-owned banks, and you wouldn't want to be in a situation where your third largest bank with 46 branches is literally going under and forcing the central bank to take it over. The statement from the central bank governor, said the bank was grossly undercapitalized, and without the intervention of the central bank, it would pose a danger to the country's economy. Yes. What exactly, which situation are we in? Is that a one-off? Would you describe that as an isolated incident? Would you describe that as a representation of a larger malaise in the economy?
Well, the banker's action was appropriate because the Crane Bank had capital adequacy issues, and the bank has a responsibility to protect depositors' funds. So it came in to protect depositors' funds, but also to stop the systemic risk that can spill over if we allow this situation to go on. But generally speaking, from what we see in the banking industry, the situation looks to be stable. The industry is in a good shape, so there is no cause for alarm. The deposits of the clients of Crane Bank are protected now, and as the governor said, he will be in a few months taking some actions, including looking for an investor to take over. Yes, there are issues, but they are not issues that one should worry about. The issues that are there, they affect the entire economy, issues of high interest rates, but as government, we are doing all we can to make sure that we solve that problem. One of the steps that we're taking is to capitalize Uganda Development Bank, because the issue actually in the industry, which is bringing interest to go up, is lack of enough liquidity in the banking industry. So I would say that the closure of Crane Bank, it is an
It hasn't been
indigenous
closed
bank.
yet. We need to be careful.
The takeover,
yes.
I tell
Takeover,
you,
yeah.
I must say the takeover of the Crane Bank does not indicate that the banking industry as a whole is in problems. It's an
But
isolated
this is
case,
not- Honourable
and I
Minister,
think the central bank has an obligation to protect depositors' funds
Honourable Minister,
every time they
you're
see
talking
risk.
about the third largest bank in the economy. You're talking about a bank with 46 branches, 750,000 customers. So this cannot be, it cannot be just taken off as lightly as, well, the central bank took appropriate action, but it tells that something fundamentally might be wrong.
Yeah, the central bank actually had even another option, but because of the importance of the Crane Bank, an indigenous bank, a third largest bank in the economy, with actually the largest, third largest deposits in the country, 1.1 trillion, the central bank decided to take over instead of taking another action, which would have been worse. So I think
who else is safe? If Crane Bank could be unsafe, who else is safe?
well, it is possible that you can be big and but you're not safe. So, and that's why the central bank, and it's not only unique to this country. We have got problems in America, in the UK. All these things have happened before. But I think the most important thing is that the depositors' funds are protected, and the systematic risk, which would spill over to other banks, has been stopped. So that's very important. And also that Crane Bank has not closed. Crane Bank is continuing, and we can only pray that we'll get an indigenous person to carry on this legacy of the Crane Bank.
Let me see what is reported here, some of the problems. Massive withdrawals disguised as payments to suppliers by corporate customers over the past 2 months prompted the placement of Crane Bank under management by the Bank of Uganda. Industry sources told the East African how traders and government agencies were tipped off by employees on a widening hole in the bank's balance sheet following the coming into force last year of stricter regulations on provisions for non-performing debts. That's the story in the East African. Yona, is this action by the central bank normal? If it is normal, what does it mean? Could you explain it to us?
First of all, let me say the action can't be normal because the situation is abnormal. They are dealing with an abnormal situation, so it can't be normal. But was it necessary? Yes, it was necessary to protect whatever there is for the depositors. It was necessary to do something so that before things get completely out of hand. I may say from personal experience, I lived through that when the central bank did the same to Nairo Bank some time ago, and I was directing that bank. We got up one day, Madam Bajenda, is she?
Justin Bajenda, the
Yes,
Director Bank Supervision.
Supervision had closed the MD's office, who was then the Honorable Professor Kamuntu. We as directors were told not to step anywhere near the bank, and we were closed out. So I have seen that one happen. But it helped that bank to come out very well, get investors, and rebuild itself to the extent that when we ultimately sold it, we sold it at a better price, although we didn't have a building, better than what the government of Uganda sold Uganda Commercial Bank for. We got $23 million when the bank, which had so many branches, was only 19. So
that's the sale of
stop.
UCB to Stanbic Bank, to Standard Group.
Yes, when the shares were 7 shillings, and in less than a year they were 70 shillings, and in a few years, I don't want to go into that. But on the steps taken by the central bank, I think it was necessary to be done because the situation was abnormal. What I cannot understand is what we hear or we see in the papers, like saying that the bank requirement at the central bank, the deposit they put at the central bank was half or less than half what the statutory requirement is. I don't know how that happened and for how long it had been like that. If it had been allowed to be like that for some time, then that was something we as citizens need, or as professionals need to know about. The second aspect is what we hear, that the bank was left to work with one auditor for a long time and nothing happened. If it was done like that also, that it brings many question marks. But as to the action being taken by the central bank, I think it was necessary to be done.
But
and I hope and pray that the people of Uganda, the depositors and the general public don't run on the bank and make it fail completely. Because if that one happens, it can have a spillover on the other banks which have, or we hear there are other banks which have some problems similar to that, especially on the issue of non-performing assets, bad loans, which cannot be serviced and what have you. We need to protect that from happening, because if it happens, it can pull down many things and disorient the programs of the planning minister of what he wants for the economy.
Enoch, let me come to you.
Yes.
Number one is it's not the first time Governor Tumusime Mutebile is either taking over bank or leading to closure. The only difference is there is a time when you had a wave of banks going under. The time of Cooperative Bank, Greenland Bank, International Credit Bank, TFA, all those went under quite in a very dramatic time and within a very short period. The question is, what is the signal that this action by the central bank sends about the state of the economy?
I would want to start off by agreeing with Honorable that it was a necessary action. Because, and primarily, and probably the question you're asking, is Crane Bank a political question or an economic question? I'll stick to the economic question. Because if you look at the last 3 years, Crane Bank made 80 billion in net profits, then zeroed down to 50 billion, and then made losses of 12 billion.
Just between 2013, 2014, 2015.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And then the big question that I haven't looked at, the real statement, but I know that their 2015 statement was a qualified opinion, meaning that their financial statement had issues. And then the other issue is that if for a bank, and by it's the fourth largest now by asset value, with asset value of 1.8 trillion, and you cannot meet a minimum requirement of 25 billion, there are serious structural issues in the management of the bank. And I think the central bank has, and we've seen it happen in America or wherever, when you see such drastic changes in the bank financial statements, you've got to take necessary action. Your question, and I would want to say that Uganda has overall done very well on the macro perspective, but it has failed or has done less impressively on the structure factors. And structure factors...
Can you explain that to a very ordinary viewer of this show? Because
I mean, we can talk about growth, that we've grown of over 7%, but we have growthless, we have jobless growth, and we have high levels and persistent levels of inflation. We have an exchange rate, that has continuously, the shilling has continuously lost value. So, and these are some of the factors. We have persistently, the Honorable has touched on it, persistently high levels of interest rates. And those are really caused by structural factors. Yeah.
And so there is another issue which maybe people tend to concentrate on growth. Growth alone can actually at times be meaningless. Growth without accompaniment of development, taking the whole population or the whole nation with it, it can be meaningless. You can grow because most of the growth figures are mostly averages of Misudira and divided by 2. Eh? And you get an average of seeing a figure so high. And yet, for me, I have nothing. But when
when you add it as an average of a number, of a larger number.
This growth thing that most people tend to hammer on and talk on, yeah, growth is good. But growth without development, growth without employment, growth without seeing the participation of the general public in the economy, if that is missing, you are missing the most important point in the economy.
Charles, before the minister comes in, and I guess the minister can help also. Look, a lot of examples of international failure of banks have been cited to sort of justify the Ugandan situation. But I think the list in Uganda is really growing longer, at perhaps at a much faster rate. And also it's limited largely to what you'd call the indigenous banks. And not only banks, many other businesses. So the big question then is, there's a lot of cry about interest rates, lack of easy money, but what are people doing with this money? I think there's a big question of systems in the way people run businesses in this country, the issue of corporate governance, sort of the weaknesses in the public sector are seeping through into the private business as well. And it's one thing to cry about the state of the economy, but when the management problem, even if you give some people a lot of money, or easy money, cheaper money, it looks like they would even go down faster. So I think the government needs to come up with the issue of how do you get businesses, even if they are personal and private, to really operate in unexpected manner.
On what basis do you base your planning if the state of affairs is growth without jobs, growth without development, without pulling everybody along? If it is what he's talking about, what do people do with the money when they have it? And we're coming out of a situation when, no, actually I haven't come out. We hear rumors that you have started compensating or bailing out people on that so-called bailout list. But can I give you more time? Can I give you more time when you come out of a short commercial break? I'll give you time. We'll start with you when you come out of a short break.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. You're still watching the fourth state, and we're discussing the state of the economy, the closure, the takeover by the Central Bank of Crane Bank. Crane Bank is the 4th largest bank, the 3rd largest indigenous bank. Because I think in government speak, Stanbic is considered an indigenous bank. Stanbic bought UCB.
Yes.
Then I think Centenary Bank and Crane Bank.
Yeah.
All the questions are coming to you, all the comments are coming to you. You're the Minister for Planning. The basis on which you're doing the planning is an economy that actually is not grounded. I mean, the action about Crane Bank is just a signal that things are not that well. You have growth that is jobless. Yes, you registered from 4.6%, jumped up to 4.8%, which was a jump from what had been projected, though we are still below what we thought would perform by. The projections are we might register growth of 5% next year. 2016, 2017. It's the numbers for 2015, 2016 that were adjusted to 4.6. And you have what one is asking about. What do people do with the money? Interest rates. All these are at play if you're going to weigh the health or the sickness of an economy.
Yes, actually, if you look at the state of our economy, I think we should really talk about this. The numbers that are coming in show that the state of our economy is stable and is growing. It's growing now because the volume of the economy now is at 84.5 trillion shillings. We have seen the growth from 15 to 16, 3.4%, now at 5%. The inflation rate has never gone above 10% for the last 20 years. It's now at 6%. We also see the well-being of people. Now the life expectancy has moved from 48 years to now 63 years. We have also seen a maintenance of our public debt at the lowest in the East African region at 34.9.
It depends
we
on how you
see-
calculate your
No, it is-
date.
these are
Yes.
standard. These are standard. We don't have.
I've had
Charles,
economists
Can I-
argue about-
Charles, if I can
Yeah.
make this point,
Mm.
we have seen people who have the permanent, use permanent materials to build their houses, you know, over 70%. So we see stable economy. The numbers show this, but also at a macro level, we continue to see some challenges. For example, 68.9% of a household still live in a subsistence economy. And that's the basis now for our planning.
69%.
68.9%.
68.9%.
Yes,
Representing
living
how
sa-
many people in actual numbers?
In
About
actual numbers,
24
actually, we have also
24
seen,
million.
if
24
you
million.
see, those are households, but if you see the poverty levels, we have
Just
reduced the
about.
poverty levels. And this, I don't know whether Yona will like this, but from 1986, 56% to now 19.6%. We're the first country to meet the millennium goal in the whole of Africa. So the economy is stable, but you have some challenges. Our challenge now is to lift those 68.9% households, which are actually 4.8 million households in Uganda, who live in a subsistence economy. So what are we doing? Investing more money in agriculture. For example, this year, we have invested 362 billion to buy seedlings, to supply, to give these households so that they can participate meaningfully in the agricultural sector. We are promoting investments, especially in factories, to add value to what these people produce so that we can export. Because the other issue, the other challenge that we are facing is the balance of payments. We import as twice as we export. And one of the reasons we don't export because the standard and the value of our goods on the international market is still low. So we must add value to these exports. So this is what we're doing. So the state of the economy is stable, but there's no economy that comes without challenges. Even the American economy now, they are in a very huge deficit, 20 trillion US dollars. But we thank God that
What's our deficit?
our balance of payments is not doing very well, but we are not really in a very red situation in terms of
Balance
public
of
debt.
payments,
So this is happening. So one of the challenges that I talked about earlier is the issue of interest rates in the commercial rates, and this has been even complicated by lack of liquidity in the market, but also our participation as government in borrowing from these commercial banks. We hope that moving forward, we'll be concentrating on concessional loans rather than going to the market to compete with the local people.
Normal creditors.
Now, you mentioned something about bailouts of companies. We would want really our account to support our companies. And the bailout that we are looking at now is not to inject money in companies, is to make sure that if you supplied government goods and services, because this has been happening, you find somebody supplied goods and services, they demand money from government for years and years and years. And yet these people have borrowed money from commercial banks. They are paying interest. So beginning with this financial year, the Secretary of Treasury issued a circular, and we are sticking to it to make sure that any organization who, those that have not paid, they have domestic areas, they should clear them. So this is the only way we can bail out, we can support our indigenous companies by making sure that we pay them on time.
Are you paying them? Have you started
Yes,
paying?
we're starting to pay them, and we hope that in the third quarter we should have cleared with the domestic areas.
Where are you going to get the money to do this?
No, it's already budgeted for, but people are just not
budgeting
paying
is one
them.
thing, having the money is another.
People were just we are not really paying these companies, and for reasons known to them. Yes, and that's why we're saying no. You are getting money. You should pay for the services that you are consuming.
Yeah, you are looking at the budget. Yes, the money is budgeted for. We all have plans, the plans without that support. Because I don't know where the money you are going to use to pay them. And I only wish we really pay them, because we have been unfair to our people. They're unfair because they borrowed money to supply government goods and services. They don't get paid. This money is borrowed, carry interest. You don't pay interest when you hold on the loan, on their money, on the payment. So you end up crippling them. It's good that the public has had it. The minister has promised they are going to be paid. We roll clap for it when it happens. But
of course, there is also a question of the goods or services they are being paid for are not really, have not benefited the country. There are also such cases.
I think that's another fundamental question. But before we go to that,
but let me finish what I wanted to say.
Sure, go ahead.
There is the other issue though. He says the money is going to be there. We hear the revenue authority is having problems of meeting its targets. The correction is very poor. So you will end up, if you are going to pay them, maybe you will end up now going again in the market, crowding them out, getting the treasury bills and some things to be able to pay them back, and then they themselves cannot borrow from the same institutions because the money will not be there.
Because they can't compete.
They can't compete with you, and these people, the banks tend to be sure that at least government treasury bills, bonds are safer than giving the money to a chap going in manufacturing or going in trade. So that issue also needs to be
Let's come and explore that a little bit more. Enoch, I want you to come in again because one of Crane Bank's troubles is centered around non-performing assets.
True.
Non-performing assets for the ordinary viewer is non-performing loans. They had quite a huge portfolio of loans that weren't just being serviced. And that's cutting across. You pick any newspaper, any Ugandan newspaper on any day, and you'll find properties being advertised. Some of the properties we have seen are the ones government was denying are on a bailout list. And then you find them in the newspaper being advertised under receivership. Can government, as it is structured today, win itself of the appetite to borrow from the domestic market? And to add to what Yona is saying, crowd out everyone else who's trying to do something, and therefore increase on non-performing assets.
I think it's two ways. One, if you start with the banks, they already have excess reserves, money that they're actually not investing. You know, beyond the minimum reserve requirement of the central bank, most commercial banks have excess reserves, which essentially they invest with government securities. However, like he has said, one of the things is that what kind of businesses are we doing? And if you look at the non-performing loans overall in all the banks, the biggest composition that is coming within the non-performing loans relates to real estate. And for a simple fact, it voices his question, what are we investing in? Are we making economic analysis or business analysis before we make investments? And you look around Kampala, it's all real estate. And a lot of it is sunk. It's not bringing in money to amortize the loans. And that's where the risk is emerging from.
But what drives that? Why does everybody who has their money or can borrow money think the safest place to put their money is not into a small manufacturing outfit, but rather in brick and mortar? There must be some rationale for that.
I think, yeah, we're all investing because we're all investing for pension. So the easiest way to put our money is in real estate. That's where you can easily have security. Because the market failure, we know that all companies that start, most companies die within, you know, the first 5 years. And the mortality rate is actually quite high. And that means that the private, what we call private failure, market failure, is quite significant. And it calls for government failure, because when you have market failure and you don't have government coming in to mitigate these challenges, then eventually you have what we call government failure. You have private failure and market failure and government failure on the other side. But
just one broad question I'd like to put before I come to the minister and to Honor. What does that mean for the economy? Longer term, if you...
I think, and I want to probably come back to the question that I was putting. What we're struggling with now is lack of, you know, middle income, substantial middle income. And I will use simple indicators. If you look at how many people are registered on NSSF, they're less than 1 million shillings, a million people. You look at how many are on the payee, they're less than 1 million, approaching 1 million. Look at the number of cars we have in an economy. And cars of 1998, you know, dominantly models, we have less than 1 million cars. And that represents the money economy. And it's a very small economy. And that's where the challenge comes in. The banks are targeting this. Because you look at the linkage, our strategic sector is agriculture. But any banker will tell you that they are not lending to the farm gate. You know, players in the agriculture sector. They are lending to middlemen. Those account for 4% of the labor force. So we have a challenge with we have a very small middle income, and we have structural factors, and looking at it, probably adding perspective to the honorable statements, is that yes, we have grown very well. If you look at, for example, poverty, we have 64 million people living at less than $2. Sorry, 64% living at less than $2. That's a poverty status
and that's
report.
using the
Just from
Yes.
the world I come from, that's the world of beer or alcohol.
Yes.
Only 10% of the alcohol drunk in Uganda is beer, and that is the only alcohol which is taxed. So even when they are looking at revenue from alcohol, they're actually looking at 10% of the alcohol. The rest of the other consumers are not able to
Well,
afford
the rest
beer
of the other alcohol is not taxed.
because it's cheap
It,
enough.
it falls outside of the tax bracket. But Honorable Minister, if you're looking at that, you're really walking on eggshells here. Because if you convert 64% into actual numbers,
It's about
at
24.
any one given time in this country, you have 24 million people
Out of 35.
out of 35 million, either directly below the poverty line or teetering on the edge, falling in and out of poverty at any one given time for the last, I don't know how many years.
30
You haven't,
years.
yes, you haven't made a shift on that.
No, we have shifted.
No.
For the last 30 years, we have shifted from 56% to now.
In percentages, yes, but in
In
actual
percentages,
But in
numbers,
absolute
to
terms.
In
now,
absolute terms,
to
yes.
now 19.6. So 19.6 over by 36 million now. Yes, the number, absolute
It's
number
about 7 million.
is high, and that's the reason we are there.
Yes,
to make sure that
7
we
million
plan
is
for these people
permanently
and
stuck
lift them
in
up
poverty.
and lift, yes.
yes, as of now, 7 million is permanently stuck in
No,
poverty.
first see the
Just
shift.
a moment, yes, just a
First
moment.
see the movement.
Then
from
you have
56
another
to-
about 12 million that teeters on the edge. Depending on when you do the survey, they will either be above or they will fall below. And even the other, I don't know how much of the remaining about 10 million are actually guaranteed that they stay there, that they represent your actual middle income. I have economists
But,
here that
but
can
the other
help me
challenge that you
to do
have
the calculation.
is of course 56% was 9 million. And then now 20% or 19.6 is 7 million. So there is a 2 million.
Yeah, in absolute,
over
Is
in
it-
absolute
in
terms.
absolute
yes.
number,
In
the number
absolute
is,
terms
is,
is-
yeah, it is
Very
significant.
stated.
And well, let me first say that the role of government, and this is the structure of our economy, the philosophy of our economy, that's led by the private sector, and the government remains the driver. We give regulations, we create an environment where these people thrive. Okay? But also we come in to these areas of poverty, making sure that the well-being of Ugandans is really uplifted. And that's why you see ourselves, we're investing, for example, this year, 50 billion to support the youth program, 43 million support women programs, 361 billion to support the agriculture sector, direct giving seedlings to Ugandans who are in the agriculture sector. Because we know the agriculture sector is an important sector, 80% of our population is in the agriculture sector. If we are going to make any significant difference in terms of the economy, we must actually target
If you
these
look over-
68.9 households who live in the subsistence economy. So our investment that we have put in the agriculture sector, you are going to see really significant change in the next 2-3 years.
Let me ask Honor's
in
question.
this sector.
Let me ask Honor's question, and using your numbers. 50 million youth livelihood program. 50, how many millions in the women?
Yeah, 43 billion.
43 billion for the women. What do they do with the money? Where are they investing that money? And what does that mean? Because you had a scheme, the start of the youth livelihood program, where the money was being channeled through banks, and the same conditions that banks use to lend to anyone else were applying to these youth applicants. After 1, 2, 3 years, when we look back, can you project and say, we are working with so many youth, we are working with so many women, in the next 5 years, we expect them to be at this level?
Yes,
Is that trackable?
No, what
And
we,
that they are paying back.
Yes.
no, on what we have now done, we have shifted from where we used to put money in the bank and have youth go to the bank and get money from the banks, because that one became a bit complicated. So we decided now to deal with the districts. So youth form groups around a certain enterprise, and they apply at the district. These groups are assessed, and then they are supported directly. And the Ministry of Gender has already been showing us success stories over these young people. At the same time, there are also, there are circles at the sub-county. There are also these seedlings that we are giving, because even if you're youth, you are entitled. If you have a project you are doing, you're entitled to do that. So we see people getting out of poverty slowly by slowly, and we hope that in the next 3 years, really, our target of a middle income status by 2020 will be achieved if we remain at this speed.
I'm afraid we need to take a quick commercial break. But just let's take the break. I attended a function somewhere in Western Uganda on Friday, actually in Kanyarieru sub-county. And at that
Which
function,
district is that?
Kanyarieru is in Chirhura district. And the district community development officer chose that function to put an announcement to tell youth who borrowed money from the Youth Livelihood Fund to pay up, and said, I'm going to be following you if you don't come and pay up. So even
but you can imagine one sub-county out of 1,400
I am just wondering if that wasn't just a representation.
The extrapolation.
The sample is significant.
That's when the announcement was
That's
made.
one of
And
the richest sub-counties in the country.
that's when the announcement was made. So I don't know what's happening elsewhere in the country. But let's take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be trying to narrow back to the banking sector to as we end this tonight's show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this last segment of the Fourth Estate. We'll be opening our phone line for you to be able to join us in this discussion and make your views, questions or comments known to us. And the debate is going on and will continue on our social media platforms, on Twitter, on Facebook, and of course, you can follow the show via live streaming, and a video will also be uploaded on YouTube once we're done. So you can be able to follow and continue giving us feedback on what you think about the show. And in the studio tonight, we have Enoch Tuinobrio. He's an economist, a PhD student in South Africa. We have Yona Kanyomozi. He's also an economist, a former minister for cooperatives. That's a few years ago, many years ago. We have, I'm lucky to be seated in between two ministers, a former minister and an incumbent minister, a current minister, Minister David Bahati. He also represents Ndorwa
West.
Ndorwa West constituency. That's Ndorwa district now, is it?
No, Kabale district.
Kabale district. You know, you've been creating these things every day. So I
It will soon be a,
Service
it
delivery.
will also
Service
soon
delivery.
be a district.
It might soon be a district. And of course, Onapito Ekomoloid. Onapito Ekomoloid represents Asalata village on this show, but he works with Nile Breweries SAB Miller's Corporate Affairs Director.
No, Nile Breweries, AB InBev.
InBev, yes. Maybe you should make the announcement.
No, that one. Yeah, I think actually the takeover of our parent company, Submiller, by AB InBev is also one of the lessons for businesses in Uganda. That you don't have to be weighed by challenges if you can get people who can take you up and make you better.
AB InBev
So
is originally where? Is Brazilian?
they are Brazilian, Belgian, they are the #1 brewer, where Submiller was #2. Of course, Submiller was doing very well, but in the world of business, you want to take...
These things happen.
So you have
Yeah, but you find our businesses here, people struggle, then they want to run to State House. I mean, they should be going to the arms of other people who can do it better.
Now, just talking about that, when the story about Crane Bank's problems broke about a month ago, the management of Crane Bank, and particularly Sudiru Parelia, spoke to the media and said they were looking for a strategic partner to buy a stake in the bank. Now, in the course of buying a stake in the bank, Crane Bank has issued 2 statements. Bank of Uganda issued a statement when social media people started circulating and saying, encouraging people to withdraw their money, which actually triggered the latest problems of Crane Bank. People kind of had a run on the bank and reduced its liquidity significantly before Bank of Uganda took over. This question of takeovers, why wouldn't Bank of Uganda, for example, allow Crane Bank to go through a process of finding a strategic partner to invest, buy a stake into that bank? Why didn't
Well, the Honourable Minister can best answer that question.
Well, there's always a process on how and when the central bank comes in to take action. And the Crane Bank was given all that allowance and the period to really organize itself. Unfortunately, that could not yield any results. But they were warned, they were cautioned, they were written to, until a time when the central bank said any minute that we delay will actually cause a risk in the banking industry, and they took appropriate action. Yes.
Just 2 years.
So, but as you can imagine, the business of banking, and I was a banker myself, it's really around the confidence of the clients. Anything that erodes the confidence of the client is dangerous to the bank. That's why you see that the central bank, even when things are being done behind the scenes, it can never come out and say, we are doing this, we are doing that, because that can affect the confidence of the clients in the bank. But all these things were being done until a time when the central bank said, any minute from now, if we don't take this action, it will be dangerous for the bank, depositors' funds, and also for the industry.
Charles, I think let me just add a little. I think one of the procedures to allow mergers and acquisitions is the whole idea of listing on the stock exchange.
True.
Such that there is transparency about how well the business is doing. And I think that's something maybe which governments need to look at. You should be listed somewhere.
And
if you
encourage companies,
yes,
come up.
I agree
that
agree
people
that
understand what's happening in
we
their
should
business.
really encourage people to list.
Yeah.
Actually,
Bank
that
said
is
it
a
had
source of.
considered issuing an IPO before, then the IPO information about the IPO leaked, and they decided to pull back on that. You have not had a company listing on the Uganda Securities Exchange in the last 4 years. The last one we had was in 2012.
Yeah,
Umeme.
true.
Yeah.
Before Umeme, we had the last one had been Stanbic, which was in 2008. There's a significant problem there, don't you think?
But
Well,
it also serves the fiscal purpose. You know, if you have some of the parastatals that depend on discretionary funding from government, if they list and are able to source funding on the market, then it leverages you, it saves you the fiscal burden that you have of borrowing from the domestic market. And, and it's a measure of efficiency also of government parastatals. If government parastatals can come out there and list, you instill in confidence in the government parastatals.
I don't know from a planning perspective why we don't have many companies coming and listing. There was in telecoms are some of the biggest grossers in terms of revenue, the revenue they gross per annum, and actually in terms of payments to the Uganda Revenue Authority, but we haven't had any of them listed yet. National operator licenses, I think for the likes of MTN, for now Airtel, even UTL, were based on the condition that they would share some of the list or on the stock market.
Actually, now he is in the right ministry, because the conditions most of these people took, some of them taking over our own things, was that in a few years' time they would list. None of them has. UTL didn't. Even when the condition, I gather, which was given to MTN, had that indirect.
For the national operator license,
Yes.
had that.
Had that thing. I was surprised to listen to Mr. Komaro from South Africa. And I think he's an African, saying, we cannot do that.
But with all due...
Why is it not possible, at least on those people where we had conditions like that, to be implemented?
Can I have a quick answer from the minister, then we need to pick some callers.
Uganda Capital Markets Authority, which is actually responsible for developing and encouraging companies to list. But as I said, we are running an economy that is led by the private sector and driven by government. There is not much, apart from encouragement, apart from regulation, that we can force companies to list. But it's a good thing, as Honorable says.
You issue the licenses,
Yes.
and you attach conditions to those licenses. So the responsibility falls back on government to enforce, to say that I gave you this license on this condition, and you have not fulfilled the condition. You need to, because that's what ends up stressing certain institutions or leading them to where they have been led, like where Crane Bank is. If they had issued an IPO, maybe they would be in a much better position.
Oh, no, that's the source, but I don't think that the central bank has a condition that you must be listed on the stock exchange. It doesn't.
We're referring to others.
Yes,
let me
not
also
have that,
try to dissuade you from one thing, that you are the drivers, the private.
Is the engine.
The engine. Let me say, look at economic history, which you must have read or studied. No country has developed without government intervention. The governments intervened in Japan. They intervened in America by protecting their own industry. They intervened, name it, they have always intervened. To say we are going to start, there was this vogue of saying that the government has no business to be in what? In business. Government has every business to be in business because it has got to look at its
I
population.
disagree with the Honorable Yona there. Government has a business of owning business but not running business.
Gentlemen,
I think that's where the problem is.
That one, no, I don't agree. I'm not saying government should run business, but they have got to intervene to help their business to move.
well,
If Toyota didn't have, or the one in Korea didn't have.
is it Samsung? I think Samsung.
Yes, if they did not have the government behind them, they wouldn't be there.
Okay, gentlemen, the president announced the other day again and said government has passed a decision to get Uganda Airlines back into the air fly again. So whether government has no business to be in business, we'll wait and see. It may be a question of management, which is a different question altogether. Let's pick a few callers and we hear what they have to tell us. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Kindly turn down the volume on your TV set.
Farouk of Uganda.
Yes, Farouk.
From Highfield, the think tank. A capitalist smells where money is.
Yes.
Now the challenge is, how can the government assure the Ugandans that the banking system is stable? Because the survival of the country depends on the banking sector. Kasoma Farouk of Uganda.
Thank you, Farouk. Can we have another caller? Hello? Do we have another caller? Hello?
Hello.
Hello? Yes, sir, we can hear you. We lost that one. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, please.
Hey,
Good evening, sir.
good evening to you.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
We can hear you. Good evening. Your name and where you're calling from?
I'm called Julius. I'm calling from Tororo.
Yes, Julius, go ahead.
I'm calling from
Yes, sir?
I'm called Julius and I'm calling from Hoima.
Hoima or Tororo, Julius?
My concern regards the taxation,
Yes, please.
especially taxation regarding used vehicles. The taxes on used vehicles, let's say below 10 years old, are put at about 100% when you put all the taxes together. And those above 10 years are about 135%. Actually, I imported a car early this year, a Toyota Hiace. And then I could not pay the tax because the vehicle was charged at $6,400. That's the cost. That's the CIF, the actual, what I paid. When it comes to the taxation, URA is charging, that's a car that is 8 years old. Now, this is about 100%. URA charging 11,000. Okay, it's CIF. For them, their CIF is not the actual. They're using 11,710 for that kind of year. I'm finding this kind of taxation very unfair.
Yes. So what's your question, Julius?
High taxes.
High taxes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the minister will respond to you. Or the many economists that I have on set here will respond to you. Do you have another caller?
Allow me to continue a little bit.
Yes, please. Yes, Julius?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We have another caller. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello,
Yes, sir.
my name is Austin Arroboy.
I can hardly hear you.
The question is honorable.
Pardon? Let's try another caller. Your line is bad. Hello? I can hardly hear you. Hello? Goodness me. Hello? I'm told, my producer is telling me that, the last listener is actually listening to themselves. So turn down the volume of the TV set if you're trying to call us. Otherwise, you'll have an echo. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, my name is Daniel.
Yes, Daniel.
From Kazo.
Yes, please.
Just wondering how Crane Bank went on putting up buildings all over the country, branches all over the country, yet actually Crane Bank was not performing. I'm just wondering if there is no hidden plan. If this was not planned, the fact that the fact that the government would like to reinstate Uganda Commercial Bank and then the rest. Is there anything like a mafia game whereby this guy was developing all these structures around the country for the government, for later the government to take over, compensate him, and then reinstate UCB?
Okay.
Cooperative Bank.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's an interesting perspective. Maybe we'll have some answers here. Let me just take one last caller. Hello?
Yes, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is David.
David?
Yes.
Yes, David, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Tororo.
Yes, please.
I'd like to respond to on the issue of bank. I think the man was smart. So because the non-performing loans is a question of him eyeing the security that is staked with the bank as opposed to the ability of the person to pay. And we see that by the reason of his 14 buildings that he owns along Kapala alone. And so it's not surprising that he has, is in this mess. Again, he's used the money that was then supposed to be for the depositors to enrich himself. Even if the bank closes, he has assets that he can fall back to. My name is David Omot. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, there we go. I have economists to help me explain this. I think the Financial Institutions Act is a fairly tough law, especially in spelling out ownership of a financial institution, which in this case is a bank. I think there's also the Banking Act.
Central Bank.
It's the Central Bank Act. Yes, the Central Bank Act, which creates the Bank of Uganda and gives it the powers to manage the economy, to manage the banking industry. So I think also insider lending, the expansion. I don't know who owns the real estate, if the bank owns the real estate, but let me have some answers from.
And their insistence on what they call core business.
Yes, what the core business is of, yes.
They don't allow them to go in.
Charles, there are two questions that we need to probably respond to.
Sure.
One was the high tax on the used vehicles. The purpose for this was really for environmental purposes, to make sure that we encourage Ugandans to import new and not used vehicles to the extent possible. That's why the Parliament and our tax rate went up this financial year. The second point is on the issue of Crane Bank, whether there is anything suspicious or insider dealing and stuff like that. We are lucky that the central bank, now the bank is in the hands of the central bank, and normally what happens when the central bank takes over in a bank, they try to do some little preliminary work to see whether there is anything that went wrong, and we are sure that the governor will be able to inform us if there is anything of that nature. But as we speak, let's leave everything in the hands of the central bank. As we speak, what's important to us now is to know that the depositors' funds are protected, that the risk of the bank is not going to spread to the entire industry, and that the banking industry in Uganda is in a good shape.
I'll ask a few more questions about that.
There is also normally when the central bank takes over, it does a quick audit of the state of affairs, and it helps. It brings out certain things which will help both the depositors and the financial atmosphere. So that will be good now that they are in charge.
But some people have been asking the question, just only before you come in, some people have been asking the question, 4 years ago in 2012, the central bank took over another bank called the National Bank of Commerce. And that National Bank of Commerce, its assets and liabilities were handed over to Crane Bank. And we haven't had anything else since then. Just ended like that. The branch, I think they had a branch on Parliament Avenue and another branch that was opening on just down here.
And a branch in Kawale.
And a branch in Kawale. And that was the end of story. So maybe we'll get these answers, maybe we'll not get these answers. I think the jury is still out there.
I think that is the minister's work.
Enoch.
Yes.
David in Tororo raises some questions. A guy who's not interested in paying back, but rather in the real estate that is staked by borrowers as collateral. Is there any merit in such kind of agenda, given the legal regime that
I think what happens is that, and the banks now are changing their model. Back in the day, if I had my property, I would borrow and stage my property. But they were not looking at my cash flow. And that's what the gentleman from Tororo is saying. And I think what you see, because the central bank keeps property index, so they have the commercial property index, shows that the price from 2012 has been declining, especially around the urban centers, Kampala and the neighboring immediate Greater Kampala. So that could actually explain what is happening to the banks. People are abandoning property for the banks. And incidentally, because when you look at the 2 of the top 5 banks, last year had a drastic fall in their profitability. 2 reasons could explain it. One was the exchange rate, because the shilling moved from 2008 to 3.4. Now that's 600 shillings, because if you're lending in dollars, and the person paying back has to earn shillings to pay back, means the cost is even higher on him. So that explains, and overall, the entire banking industry, nearly 50% of the loan portfolio is in foreign currency. So that alone last year had an impact on some of these. And these are some of our key, some of the companies that are on the bailout list. That is the exchange rate effect that was impacting them. But the real estate is actually very significant. And it's both trade and real estate that are forming the core of the non-performing loans. And that's the exchange rate and the interest rates. Now,
you see, over the last
and
about
the bubble
1 month,
busting of the commercial
over the last about 1 month, the dollar it had started coming down. I mean, the shilling had started gaining. It has again lost significantly because you're inching now. You're above 3,400. Yes, about 3,400. I don't know where it is headed. I don't know where it will end. And some people are saying, attributing this to people withdrawing their money, especially foreign depositors with Crane Bank, picking their money in shillings, going to the market and picking up, trying to buy dollars so that they can repatriate their money. I have had that talk.
I'm not very sure of that, but there are 2 factors that could be playing in. One is the seasonal effect. People the import in October and November is usually higher because people are preparing for the December season. But also, because we had high interest rates, especially on government securities, we had foreign inflows coming to invest in the government treasury bills. Now with the treasury bills dipping, you're seeing foreigners withdrawing their money. And those 2 factors are now playing into the exchange rate. Okay. But incidentally also, I think overall, like he has said, we export half what we import. So the pressure will persist. And when it persists, it means, and even for example, the money we borrowed from PTA to do exchange rate management, that money hasn't come through. If you look at loan performance of that loan, it's at 0%. So we still have challenges, and the exchange rate is going to remain vulnerable to loss of value.
Charles, I just wanted to say something on the person who called about cars, and the minister answered that you have to charge to protect the environment. Yes, but I think if the countries have new cars, they must be affordable. How many people can afford new cars? Hardly any individuals can afford. Maybe it's companies, NGOs. One way to make new cars affordable is to attract a car assembly here. We had a South Korean president here. These are among the most known car manufacturers. Was there any discussion how someone could actually ship an assembly point here, maybe for East Africa? What would you give them as incentives? Because I know all imports will always be expensive.
Yes.
And used cars are out of range for any Ugandan, including us around this table. You can afford a new car.
Yes, that's true. But that's the reason why we could not actually take it 200% increment. We put it at 135. The issue is, what you are saying is right. And there are a number of discussions going on to have a number of actually car assembling plants in the country. So we hope that within 3 years, 5 years, we shall have a plant here which including even our own.
Actually, I've been told, Kona, that when the South Korean president,
they have a very good business case, by the way.
They have an MOU between, I think, Hyundai and Kira EV. There is some understanding they signed an MOU to see to that development. But the bigger question, the elephant in the room, Yona, as we end this show, because I'm being told our time is out, the elephant in the room is, are there significant dollar inflows into this economy? We are undertaking on significant projects. We have projects about the refinery in Kabale. Government of Uganda needs to put in $400 million on its own. The strategic investor needs to put in $600 million. And then they need to be able to attract some foreign funding to build the refinery. You have the oil pipeline. I don't know if you have the money for the oil pipeline. We have the standard gauge railway. I don't know if you have money for the standard gauge railway. We have the hydropower dams, Karuma and December. Apart from the problems that are there with the actual works there, I mean the civil works there, I don't know if you have the money for that. You have now, you're talking about the national airline, $300 million. Do we have that money coming in? Is that money going to come from, I don't know.
Well, the source of these major projects has been external funding, which are really loans. We are running an 85% of the project on loan for Karuma and Simba. We will also be having, hopefully, we'll have an investor for the refinery. And then for the airline, we are discussing which model we should take, whether it should be government putting money or an investor to invest in. But at the end of the day, for us to move this economy forward, we must really focus on export and also looking at the number of items that we are importing. Is there a possibility? Is there a move that we can manufacture them here? Yes, that's why you see us attracting a lot of investments in factories so that the things that we are importing, the dollars that we are shipping away, can actually be done. Those things can be manufactured here. So in the long term, this economy is going to grow, and the imbalance, the trade imbalance, is going to be wiped out.
You know, the challenge with that is that's a story we've had for so many years. I remember
it's not a story, I think.
Someone in 1996 said, why should I go to buy furniture from somewhere when I can get it from Katwe, when I drink from a plastic cup?
Yeah.
and I don't know why that discussion ended.
We're actually now going to support the prisons, to start manufacturing furniture here, because they have an advantage in this business. They've done it before, and also other indigenous companies to do this.
That prisons department makes some of the best furniture in this country. It has been there for many years. I don't know how much support it has gotten over the years. Yona, your last word.
The issue is to look at the economy as a whole, because since we are importing more than what we're exporting, we need to look from within and also cut the excessive administrative expenditure and rechannel that money to those productive things the ministry is talking about. If you are running a government which is very, very heavy, which takes a lot of resources, it doesn't help you then to talk about being so attractive. The people will come. But those who will come will be looking at the quickest returns and
they'll run away. Okay, Enoch, your last word.
Two things. One is that I do not think from the numbers perspective that Uganda can attain middle income in 2020. Primarily growing from 780, which is our per capita now, dollars, to $1,030 requires Uganda to grow at 10%, given that its population is growing at 3%. But on the other side, we also need to address some of the structural factors. The macro stability that you're talking about is like Panadol to a malaria patient. It gives you relief, but it doesn't solve the malaria problem. And if I may, one of the issues that you could see is inflation. Inflation eats away the value of money. And 10 million today is worth 6.4 in 2011. And that tells you that the purchasing power of the small middle income is actually dwindling. And if we do not address that, we have a big structural problem to deal with.
Let Ona speak and then you have the last word. Ona, your last word.
Look, I'm happy to have next to my friend, the minister. I was in government, I'm in private sector. I firmly believe... But you support the government. Yes, I firmly believe that the biggest challenge we have is that the public sector, as it's designed and as it functions in Uganda and perhaps in much of Africa, is incapable of delivering the public goods that we all aspire to. And they must swallow the humble pie and really devise new mechanisms for delivery.
Mr. Minister, are you capable of walking the talk?
Yes, we are actually walking the talk. And if you see the plans that we have, the National Development Plan, the Vision 2040, our target for the middle income status by 2020, this is to lift the 6.8 million, $68.9% of the households who are living in subsistence in economy into a cash economy. That's our target, that's our phase, and we believe that we can achieve that.
Just but I just want you need growth of 10% at least.
Well, those are some of the theoretical, but I think practically we have seen that this can actually be achieved and this can be achieved. But again, to the topic of the day, the banking industry, I think we need to reaffirm and reassure clients of Crane Bank that the bank
and the general citizens
and the general citizen that the Crane Bank is now in safe hands, is operating, the depots, your depots are protected, and the banking industry is in a good shape. There is no need for panic.
Our job is to ask the questions, especially when things happen. So we will invite you back or someone else from government to answer, to say, but you told us the other something else the other day, and now you're telling us something different in case things don't work out the way you think. Our time is out. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for making time for the show. Thank you very much to all our viewers for joining us tonight, and always. This discussion continues on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. The video will be out on YouTube. And if you've been following by live streaming, please, we encourage you to continue this discussion. Thank you very much to the production crew that stays up this late to deliver the show to you. From me, have a good night.